Good evening. Currently here today is George Frey, who is the first vice president of the fair as we are doing this taping. But George, we want to talk to you about your involvement of the fair since you became involved numerous years ago. George, can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved with the Oley Fair?
Well, I was an Exeter resident, still am, so I didn't get involved with the fair as much as a lot of kids did over here at Oley, but I remember when I was probably in elementary school, my parents brought me over because I remember walking around in the school and saw various things, but never got really involved. Not until basically I got through college and the service picked me up for 2 years that I finally start coming on a daily basis just because I like to be here. And 1 year, I'm an auctioneer, and the Miller brothers down in Pleasantville, they were out at the dairy barn, and they used to come to all the auctions, and they'd buy collectibles and antiques. And so I was talking to them once, and I just said to them, I said, how the devil do you get involved here in the fair? And they said, whoa, boy, we'll get you involved. And I said, okay, good. And they said, well, you should start coming to meetings and so forth. And well, I didn't even know when the meetings were, but anyway, the next year the fair book came out. And I don't know if my mom looked in or my wife looked in, and they said, your name's in the fair book. And I said, what? They said, yeah, it's assistant financial secretary. I was never at a meeting prior to that. But anyway, that was my first involvement. I kept coming to the fair, and I showed up to help, to do whatever I could. Eventually, I got pushed up to vice president. But my first couple of years that I was in the fair, the first thing we wanted to do was put up a pole building, which we have up here. And they asked me, I was on the committee, and I was the one that wrote up all the specs and sent it out to various contractors. And we discussed we wanted to make it high enough in case, at that time, Oley had 2 bus companies that hauled the kids around. And we wanted to make it high enough that he could put school buses in there if they wanted in the off season. So other than that, we sent it out and built it, and that was my first job as that I remember in the fair. And then from there on, things went on and on and on. We kept making improvements and so forth, and I got involved with a lot of them. I just remember the first, I guess, improvement that we made was I think Danny Levingood was the fair center. We tore the bingo building down, and we got those shelves to put all the baked goods and other things, canned goods on. And these shelves were down in the commercial exhibit building. We used to get 4 kids to carry them up, and they'd often get their feet caught underneath the legs and so forth because they couldn't carry them out far enough. So I made a buggy that could come up. We could haul them up with that. Next thing was Mark Hoke out here with the dairy barn. We had something going around that we had to put wash stations at the animals so people could wash their hands. And we used to rent them from the portable toilet guy, and these things wouldn't even last a day. And they'd be full, and they were no good. So Mark and I came up with an idea of making some wash stands. Between me and Mark, we made them. And then a couple of years later, a lot of people came to me and said, the old people, and said, you ought to have some benches here for these old people to sit down. So then I came up with an idea to get a bunch of benches, and we sold advertising on them, and I think we did 15 the first year, and then maybe 27 the second year. They went over like hotcakes. And we had a snowmobile trailer that we could take 8 out at a time and 8 in at a time. And Kevin Beaver said, we ought to have a trailer that we could load all these at one time. So Mark Hoke and I got together, and we made a bench buggy that loads all 42 or 43 of them. So we didn't have to go in and out 8 or 9 times. What else did I do?
So being an auctioneer by trade, you followed in your dad's footsteps as he was the auctioneer on the Saturday evening of the fair the last probably event of the fair. And you today continue that, you take the lead on that. Talk a little bit about what you remember about the auction back then compared to how it is now, and who may have been the bidders and what kind of prices certain things may have brought.
Well, I didn't have anything to do with it back in the early years. Pop did it, but supposedly they took everything to the stage and sold it from the stage. And Pop told me that the politicians used to come there and they would buy these cakes and so forth for, big money, and made sure everybody saw them and make sure everybody knew who they were, that they spend money on your cake or your pie, so maybe they bought your vote. I never had any experience with that, but since then we moved out to the Ag Building. I don't know that it changed too much. We used to take quarters, now we take $50 because we don't want to mess around too much. It's the same amount of stuff coming out, I think. I just remember one thing we don't sell anymore. We used to have eggs, and the eggs were there for a week, sitting up in the poultry building in the heat. We'd sell these eggs that were sitting in the warm room for 5, 6, 7 days, and we don't sell eggs anymore. But of course, the prices increase sometimes. Now some of them don't. There's a lot of people that show up every year and buy cakes that been sitting there for 6, 7 days, and pay $5, $6, $7, $8, $10 for them. And same way with cookies and so forth. We're glad they are, but it's fun, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Well, you've been around the fair for a long time, and we're certainly glad you have been. You've been a huge asset, but there's got to be some 1 or 2 memories that just kind of stick in your mind over the past several years of the fair.
Well, I just enjoy the fair. I enjoy being a part of it. It's sort of a challenge because you got to try to keep ahead of people like Kevin, Danny Levengood, always are coming up with ideas and things to do, and you got to try to help them be a little better, or you got to come up with something better. So it's a challenge to, try to stay ahead of them and make this fair unique, which it is, and better and easier to put up, easier to tear down, and accommodate the people. I mean, I learned a lot here at the fair. We put up all the overhead lights one year. I learned to run electricity. And the toilets, a lot of times, the flushers don't work. I learned to go down there and tear toilets apart and get them working. So, I mean, I learned a lot of stuff here at the fair that I wouldn't have normally learned at home. And it's been a great experience, great learning experience. I enjoy it, and I hope to continue to enjoy it for as long as I can.
Thank you for everything you do, and thank you for this interview tonight.
You're quite welcome.